Welcome. I'm Sarah Barth, Executive Director of Semper Virens Fund, and thank you for joining us for another of our Under the Redwoods webinar series, in which we together explore the beauty, history, science, and benefits of redwood forests. Semper Virens Fund acknowledges that the redwood forests of the Santa Cruz Mountains, within which we do our conservation work, are among the ancestral homes and lands for many indigenous people who cared for these forests for millennia until they were forcibly removed. We are really grateful and proud to work with their descendants, including the Amamutsan tribal band and the Muwekma Ohlone tribe, to help restore their cultural and traditional relationships to these magnificent lands. And some of that work includes partnering to restore native plants, which is the topic of our webinar today. Thank you also to our growing and steadfast community of supporters. Your commitment to redwood conservation in this region inspires us to share with you fresh perspectives, fresh knowledge, fresh understanding around the importance of the conservation work that you are supporting. So thank you for your commitment to thriving redwood forests in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And finally, I want to mention that this episode of Under the Redwoods is sponsored by Stadia Capital Group, partnering with Semper Virens Fund to protect and preserve the majestic California redwoods for today and future generations. We are thankful to them for their generous support. Many of you watching today have probably been with us for some of our other webinars, but just to remind you that we do like to take questions from the audience, and you can do so using either the chat or the Q&A functions at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can today. Finally, I want to mention that we are recording this webinar and we'll be recasting it on our website following this. So if you have to leave early or you want to share it with others, it will be available for you to see. Moving on to what's going on with Semper Virens Fund, I just want to note that the spectacular and iconic Santa Cruz Mountains that stretch from the skyline ridges to the sea, the Pacific Ocean, which spans about 1,000 square miles of forests and watersheds. It's a tremendous natural complex. And as we've been discussing with you in previous webinars, it's in a moment of dramatic and significant change. It is always home to a diverse array of plants, animals, and other species, including lots of endemic and rare plants. And most years after the winter rains give way to spring and its bounty, we see all kinds of amazing natural plant diversity emerge. But in years like this one, when we're following a major wildfire, such as the devastating fires of 2020, we see unique and really rare plants that emerge only after fires, plants that sometimes haven't been seen in the region for decades. And this is one of those years. This is one of those periods where the region ecologically is in tremendous dynamism. So this is one of those springs where we will have an opportunity to find and discover plants that are truly spectacular and may be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see them. To help us understand the exceptional opportunities that this spring presents in terms of botany and wildflowers specifically, we're thrilled to be joined today by Amy Patten. She has a background both in wildlife biology as well as in botany. And I think she has the best professional title of anyone I've ever worked with, and that is rare plant treasure hunter. And she does that work in her role working with the California Native Plant Society. And from her perch there, she and her colleagues are at the forefront of research and restoration efforts around rare plants in this region. So before she leads us on a magnificent tour of the region and what we might find following the fires of this past 2020 season, I do want to mention that Semper Virens is delighted to be partnering with Amy and her colleagues at the California Native Plant Society to produce a wildflower guide, excuse me, that will be available to you shortly. And it's not just a wildflower guide, because there are many of those available, great guides available, but it is specifically focused on those rare and special species that emerge following fires. So be on the lookout for that. I hope also that Amy will take a moment to talk to you about the citizen science project that she and the California Native Plant Society have underway that gives you and others a chance to participate directly in sleuthing for extraordinary plants. So with that, thank you for joining us, and please help me in welcoming Amy Patten. Amy.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here, and I love talking about rare plants. So this is a great opportunity for me to talk to all of you about some of my favorite plants from the region, and hopefully talk more about fire ecology and expand our understanding of how these rare plants deal with fires in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So my name is Amy Patten. I'm the Rare Plant Treasure Hunt Manager for California Native Plant Society. California Native Plant Society, or CNPS, is a nonprofit that's devoted to conserving and protecting our native flora and the very important landscapes where our native plants grow. And we do that through education, horticulture, and plant science. I'm in the Rare Plant program, and I run a community science project called Rare Plant Treasure Hunt, which has a goal of documenting and finding new populations of rare plants throughout the state. So to start out, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background information on our native flora and how they interact with fire. So first of all, what is a native plant? That is a species that naturally occurs here. It evolved in California, did not come here through human introduction, which we would compare to a non-native plant or introduced species is something that came here through human means, either through agriculture or escapees from gardens, or hitchhikers that have seeds that hitch a ride on vehicles or clothing. And invasive species are introduced species that have a negative impact on the environment and often an economic cost as well. But today we are mostly just going to be talking about our native plants. There are so many good things to say about native plants, more than I can fit in one slide. They're habitats for wildlife. They create shade that protects our riparian corridors and rivers and other water features. Insects need them for nectar and food and nesting sites. And they're really the backbone of our biodiversity in California. So a native plant doesn't just exist on its own. It's part of a very important food web. And each and every plant supports many other organisms besides just its species. So that's why we're focusing on our native flora today. And what is a rare plant? A rare plant has a limited geographic range. In California, we have really interesting steep and rugged topography and lots of different rock and soil types that can limit the ranges of different plants. Rare plants can also have few numbers of populations or low numbers of individuals within each population. And many of these rare plants are facing conservation threats throughout their ranges. Plants can be rare from natural causes, like specialization on certain soil types or rock types, like plants that specialize on serpentine soil. They can have low reproductive output. Maybe they don't produce too many seeds, or they have an inefficient dispersal mechanism, or they rely on specific pollinators. Plants can also be rare from human-caused factors such as development, logging, mining, and climate change. California is very special because we have more native plants than any other state in the US. And a really cool feature of that flora is that over 1/3 of our 6,500 native plants are rare. So that means they have some type of special status listing, like under the Endangered Species Act or under CNPS's California Rare Plant Ranks. And out of these, about 1,300 of them are endemic to California and found nowhere else in the world. So if you are a plant in California, then you have evolved with wildfire. And in Santa Cruz County and Santa Cruz Mountains, pre-colonization, fires would start from lightning strikes, which are typically characterized by low intensity burns. Those types of burns will clear brush and leave behind open soil that allows other species to compete and germinate. Additionally, indigenous peoples in the Santa Cruz Mountains practice cultural burns, which maintain coastal prairies and other ecosystems. Our last major fire was in 1904. And this fire covered a lot of the acreage that burned in 2020. But since then followed a history of fire suppression regimes over the past 100 years. So when natural fire is suppressed and prescribed and cultural burning isn't practiced, then lots of fuels can accumulate in the undergrowth of chaparral and forests. And the shrubs and more late successional species and dense forests don't leave any space for annuals and wildflowers and smaller species to compete. Then with the buildup of fuels, that eventually turns into mega fires like the CZU Lightning Complex fire. So this fire started as a series of lightning strikes in August 2020, and it burned almost 90,000 acres in the Santa Cruz Mountains, destroyed thousands of structures and hundreds of homes. And this fire has been really tough for people that live in the surrounding communities, both in terms of losing homes and properties and businesses. But a lot of special places have also been affected by the fire, like Big Basin. I volunteered at Big Basin for about 6 years. It's one of my favorite places in the world. And it's really hard to say goodbye to your favorite campground, your favorite hiking trail, places where you had childhood memories or memories with your family. And now kind of what we're seeing are places that look like a moonscape with only charred trees left behind, ground covered in ash or bare soil. And it looks pretty depressing on the surface. So it kind of feels like this could be the end of the places that we know and love in the Santa Cruz Mountains. But the good news is that there's actually a lot going on under the surface, and the landscape has already begun regenerating and healing and coming back from the fire. So I'll just tell you a little bit about fire ecology in California. Once a fire comes through a landscape, it levels the playing field for competition, and it makes it easier for species that haven't been able to outcompete trees and shrubs for a while. They'll have a chance to germinate more seedlings and have more space to grow without competing for light and resources. Fires can temporarily clear invasive grasses and shrubs and other brush built up on the ground. However, a lot of these species that come up after fires will disappear over time as succession continues and competition becomes more intense with time. So a very special feature of our flora is that we have a lot of fire follower species. And these species can reappear after 100 years or more from dormant seeds that have been lying in wait within the seed bank. These species use smoke or heat or both as a germination cue. So when the fire comes through, that tells them that it's time to germinate, conditions are good, and they start doing their thing. A lot of these species are present in small numbers between burns, but once the fire comes through, they'll be present in thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands. So the bush mallow in the lower right is from genus Malacathamnus, and that's a species of shrub that's a fire follower. A lot of them are rare, and they've been shown to regenerate from seeds that were over 100 years old. And I'm excited to see some of those after the fire. So despite our lack of fires in the past 100 years, there have been some small prescribed burns and brush fires. And from those areas, also areas that have not burned in nearly 100 years, a few fire followers have popped up in the past. So local botanist Dylan Neubauer found this beautiful Hulsea native sunflower, which is distributed across the West. There's not been too many records in the Santa Cruz Mountains, but this is one that I'm expecting to see a lot more widespread after the fire. And then a really cool rare plant is the Santa Cruz Mountains pussy paws. It's a low growing herb that only can grow on bare soil and has struggles to compete with other shrubs in the landscape. And although the type specimen is from Santa Cruz County, it hadn't been seen in the county in more than 50 years until Dylan found one last year. So this is another species that I'm expecting we will find a lot of new records from after the fire. And it's important to note that fire is not, it's not universal in how it affects the landscape. Lots of different factors influence how hot the fire burns. The habitat type will determine the effects on fire. For example, chaparral is used to more frequent fire regimes, and it often burns hot and intense and destroys most of the plants in the population, but they come back quickly. Forests typically have a lower return interval for fires. And so for those ecosystems, we see long-lived species that have adaptations to withstand fires. So like in redwoods and giant sequoias, adult trees have really thick bark. So that allows them to survive a wildfire. Or then the other strategy is that even if the fire destroys your vegetation on top of the ground, then you come back from your seed bank, or the fire stimulates vegetative growth, and you have a lot of seedlings coming up after the fire. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about some of our rare plants and other fire following species. Manzanitas are a type of shrub that is found all over California in many different habitat types. We have about 40 in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and 10 of those are rare. And they can be really hard to identify. So just for today, I'm going to talk about my favorite one that I think is maybe a little bit easier to identify as well. So this is the Bonny Doon or silverleaf manzanita. It's endemic to the Santa Cruz Sandhills. It's got this really beautiful gray-green color on the leaves, which can make it easier to identify from the other manzanitas. And that color is actually an adaptation to deflect heat in the chaparral and hot environments. And one of the main stands of Bonny Doon manzanita burned in the 2008 Martin fire. So all the shrubs that you see in this picture regrew from seeds since the 2008 fire. And in the burn area today, all of the adult shrubs are gone, but we know that pretty soon, maybe in a year, we're going to see some seedlings coming up from the dormant seeds in the seed bank. Manzanitas have evolved with fire and deal with it in two different strategies. The ancestral trait is to resprout from a burl. So that's kind of a thick woody growth. Think of like a tree trunk at the bottom of the plant. After a fire, most of the trunk and the above ground vegetation is destroyed, but then immediately afterwards, it puts up shoots from vegetative buds that are dormant in the burl. And the burl is also an important character to help ID manzanitas. So if you're trying to figure out what you're seeing, you often look for burl or no burl. The other strategy is to have increased seed germination like Bonny Doon manzanita. So you put out a large seed bank over time, and then after a fire, tons of seedlings will sprout up and enjoy that nice bare soil and lack of competition for a few years. Here's another species that's endemic to the Santa Cruz Sandhills. This is a really stunning flower, the Ben Lomond spine flower. Each of those flowers is only a few millimeters long, and the plants are only an inch or two high. They're really spectacular. They can form beautiful hot pink carpets in the sandhills. And they are found in open areas, typically in sand parkland habitat. which is typically bare sand. They don't do well competing with shrubs or invasives. So that has really limited their numbers in recent years in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Today, you can mostly see them around Felton, Scotts Valley, and Bonnie Doon, but there were some historic populations in Big Basin area, and I am really excited to check out that area and see if we can find some new populations or find some of these old historic populations that haven't been seen in a long time. A lot of disturbance can be bad for plants in general, but many plants also thrive on some types of disturbances. In this case, the spine flowers really like some amounts of foot traffic and road work because that helps clear open soil. So you can see them a lot of the times growing in trails or on the sides of trails and roads. Here's one of our most sensitive rare species, the Ben Lomond wallflower or Santa Cruz wallflower. It's also endemic to the Santa Cruz sandhills. This one has been really sensitive to habitat fragmentation, as well as fire suppression. Both of those factors have really isolated the populations, so they don't have very good gene flow. And unlike the manzanita and the spine flower, which both put out pretty large seed banks that can persist for a long time in the soil, this species we don't think has very good adaptations for a persistent seed bank. So it probably will benefit from some of the open space cleared by the fire, but we're not sure if we'll see it in new areas or if numbers will actually come back from this one. It's got a really interesting biennial life cycle. It starts out as this little funky paintbrush looking thing that comes out of the sand for the first year. Doesn't look like it should belong to a flower at all. And then the second year it puts up a stalk and blooms with these beautiful bright yellow flowers. Should also mention that Santa Cruz sandhill habitat has been developed by about 40% or so. And mining and building of homes and even trailer parks and businesses, as well as invasive species, non-native grasses especially, have really hurt this species. And a lot of our populations are declining, even in protected areas, sometimes for unknown reasons. We also have a few rare trees in the Santa Cruz Mountains. The Santa Cruz cypress is one of the rarest cypresses in the world, found only in the Santa Cruz Sandhills and Butano Ridge. This species depends on fire as an important part of the life cycle. The cones are serotinous, which means that heat from the fire will cause them to open. So as the cones grow, they're typically tightly fused, but when the fire comes through, the heat will open the cones, and then they fall to the forest floor in large numbers and eventually germinate into seedlings. So this species has evolved to have nearly complete adult mortality during fires, but they don't live very long, so it's necessary to have these periodic fires to kind of push the reset button and cause germination of a lot of new seedlings. So although it looks devastating right now in some of these cypress stands, the fire has really bought the species decades more of time. And another rare tree with a similar life history is the Monterey pine. This tree is really interesting because it's one of the most widely planted trees worldwide for timber. You can find it all over the world, also grown as an ornamental. But in the wild, it only has 3 populations in California, and one of them is right nearby in Año Nuevo and Rancho del Oso. They also have serotinous cones and are not especially long-lived. So when the fires come through, it'll kill a lot of the adult trees, but then once again opens up the forest floor to allow for more germination of seedlings. Here is a species that I really love. Many people don't know that we have orchids native to California, let alone in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So we've got about 20 different species that you can see. This one, the white flowered rain orchid, I tried to see this for about 5 years. I tried so hard. I went too early, I went too late. I took a group of middle schoolers on a rare plant treasure hunt to look for it, and we didn't find it. Finally, last summer, I got lucky and got to the population at the right time. And I was able to make a conservation seed bank collection 4 days before the CZU Lightning Complex fires. So I'm really interested to see how this one will respond after fires. Although when we hear orchids, we often think of more moist landscapes and more shady. This genus Piperia can often live in hot and dry habitats, and other species do okay after fires. So this is one I'm really interested to see how it reacts. This is one of those that has low numbers in all of its populations, often 20, 30 plants maximum, and not all of the plants put out flowers every year. So we don't have a great understanding of its life history. And Big Basin is also the southernmost extent of its range, so hasn't had a super strong foothold in the Santa Cruz Mountains, but I'm excited to see if this one will come back or maybe show up in some new spots. Here's another one I'm really excited about, the Santa Cruz Mountains beard tongue. This is endemic to the Santa Cruz Mountains, and it needs brush clearing or fire to reproduce and exist. And most of the records for this species are from the 1800s through 1950s. And a lot of those populations haven't been able to be refound. So this indicates that it's very likely a fire follower. It's absolutely beautiful. The stems are 1 to 2 feet high with this gorgeous bright purple flower. And this is one I'm really optimistic about us being able to see a lot more of in the burn area. And although there are other purple penstemon species found outside of the Santa Cruz Mountains, this should be the main one that we see here. So it makes it an especially great target for community scientists to detect this one. Typically blooms in May, so around May start looking, and hopefully you can spot some of these penstemons. Now I'm going to talk about a few species that are not as rare as the previous species, but are locally uncommon, that we might have a better chance of seeing after the fire. So a great fire follower is the sweet scented Phacelia. It smells like mint and honey. It grows out of a little basal rosette, and it's only a couple inches high, so you have to really get on the ground and get your face in there, but absolutely amazing smell. Beautiful purple and yellow flowers. And I've already seen some of this blooming in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and I'm seeing lots of basal rosettes up. So although not many records have been recorded in the county previously, I think this is one that we will see in lots of new places. Another one is Brewer's Calandrinia. It's in the same family as miner's lettuce, so it's got really thick leaves, very fleshy, that hold a lot of water, and it also grows in a low rosette. Many of you might be familiar with red maids, Calandrinia menziesii, which is sort of a hot pink, and this rare one, the Brewer's Calandrinia, will have more of a muted pink flower and often has some gentle striping, so that's how you can tell those apart. And I saw this one blooming last weekend. So another one that we can expect to see up in greater numbers around the mountains. Bear grass is really amazing. It's also locally rare in the Santa Cruz Mountains, but widely distributed through Western US. And this is another amazing fire follower. It survives fires with a rhizome under the soil, and after the fire comes through, it puts out vegetative growth almost immediately. A lot of deer and other herbivores love foraging on the flowers, so it can be an important food source for animals once it blooms. And they don't bloom every year. They often bloom in 5 to 7 year cycles when conditions are right. And although they're called bear grass and they've got this long leafy vegetation at the bottom, they're actually more closely related to lilies. And this one isn't rare, but it's so beautiful. And so I just had to talk about it. This is the bush poppy. These guys require smoke and heat for seeds to germinate. And so they can often be really expensive in the nursery trade because you have to do a lot of treatments with the seeds to prepare them commercially. It's a chaparral species, and it's usually found in sunny exposures, often on steep slopes and rocky or sandy soil. Has really thin leaves, which is another chaparral adaptation to prevent moisture loss from the leaves. And you can see these in the Bonnie Doon Preserve, where the 2008 Martin Fire was, or up on Loma Prieta Summit area. And this is one I think we will also be seeing a lot more widespread in the mountains following the fire. So these are not plants, but couldn't help but mention some of these other cool fire followers. There's a lot of crazy fungus that has been coming up. A lot of fungus species specialize in growing in charred soil in the post-fire zone. And I've seen about 6 different fire follower species so far. And then insects and birds can also be fire followers. So I don't know of too many examples locally since we haven't had fire in so long. I think we'll be learning about some new fire follower relationships, which I'm hoping everyone will help us document. So I know that after the fire, we've been getting a lot of inquiries about how to help and how to get involved. And that has led to the creation of our Fire Followers Project, which is a community science effort to document species coming up in the burn areas from the 2020 fires. Locally, we're partnering with the Santa Cruz Museum of Natural History and the Norris Center from UCSC to help build a community around making these natural history observations. And we'll be putting on trainings and providing resources for participants to learn about different plants and animals that are in the burn area. And we'll primarily be making these observations in iNaturalist, which is a community science platform. What I love about community science is you don't need any special training. You don't need a college degree. Anyone can be a community scientist. All you have to do is have an interest in science and nature and be able to go out and make some natural history observations. For my project, the Rare Plant Treasure Hunt, I can't count how many times someone with little to no botany experience finds a rare plant before I do. So I'm confident through this project that people will be making some really amazing discoveries. And what's great about iNaturalist as a platform is if you don't know the idea of something, you can put whatever level of taxonomy you recognize. So you can say, this is a tree, this is an oak, this is a coast live oak. And other naturalists on the platform will crowdsource your identification and weigh in and confirm the ID or provide an alternate ID. So even if you're not super experienced with natural history, this will be a great way to learn. And unfortunately, the burn area is still not safe for visitors in most areas. Big Basin, Butano, and burn areas in Henry Cowell are still closed. So please don't trespass and be patient. I know it sounds really exciting to get into the burn areas right now. A lot of these fire followers will be around for several years. So there's still lots of time to see the amazing wildflower displays and to be able to access those areas in the future. So in the meantime, this is a great opportunity to learn more about natural history in the unburned areas. And if you go to our Fire Followers website, we also have a list of burn areas that are currently open to the public. So there's some in East Bay Regional Parks, in some other places in Napa and Sonoma that are open right now that you can go and check out. We also have a link to safety tips, and we encourage everyone for any natural history outings you do in or outside of the burn zone to know before you go and look up local regulations and closures before visiting those areas. Okay, that's all I have for today. So wanted to thank some of the folks who helped me with the slides. And if any of you would like to talk about joining the project, or if you have private property within the burn area and you would like to invite volunteers to come survey, or have botanists do a botany survey, please drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you. And I think now I will join Sarah for our conversation.
Thank you, Amy. I could watch you for a really long time. Those images are lovely. And the story of the natural history of some of those species, the life cycle of some of those species is really cool. So thank you. I'm curious. So Semper Virens Fund owns a fair bit of forests and other wildlands in the Santa Cruz Mountains. We're quite a large landowner, actually. And so I know we inventory our plants when we acquire our property, and we are busily starting to inventory our properties that were burned to try to assess and document what species are emerging. But I'm curious if you have any guidance for other landowners, somebody who owns 10 acres or 5 acres, if there are things that they can and should be doing on their own properties, recognizing that a lot of the public lands right now are closed for safety reasons. Do you have any advice for them or suggestions?
Yeah, I think that iNaturalist is a wonderful tool to get started. It's like a naturalist notebook. Before iNaturalist, I had dozens of notebooks that ended up in closets and bookshelves. Nothing happened with the data. By uploading the observations in iNaturalist, you have your own record. And then that's also a way for other naturalists and botanists to comment on some of those findings. So if you find something that's really rare or notable, then other people will be able to comment on it. And we'll also be sharing the data with agencies and land managers that in surrounding areas that will help with management of those properties in the future too.
Yeah, and you're really helping to enlarge the greater understanding of what is out there in our region, botanically speaking. We've talked a lot, or you've spoken a lot about what happens post-fire, but we are entering, or we are in, I should say, a period of drought right now in California. Who knows how long that's going to last, but certainly drought conditions exist today. And I wondered if you had any thoughts or observations about what that means for native plants. Are there similar drought followers or native species that are particularly vulnerable to drought that you wouldn't expect to see changes happening in this region as a result of the lack of precipitation?
So drought's another thing. Like fire, not all species are affected equally. Some species have better adaptations for hot and dry weather. If you have more of a seed bank, if you're more of a generalist, you might be better equipped to move into new areas, or be better equipped to adapt to changes in water regimes. However, our plants have evolved with droughts in California, often for several years. So many of our species will be okay for short-term droughts, but of course, with climate change and increasing fire regimes, that's going to be kind of a cumulative effect over time, and we're not really sure how that will affect our native plants. For rare plants, many of them have a low reproduction. They don't produce many seeds and don't cover a large area. So those species could be more susceptible to drought. And of course, species that live in bogs, marshes, riparians, those species will also be more affected by the drought versus other species that can live in drier climates.
Speaking of climate change, we've touched on fire and drought a bit, but there are a suite of anticipated impacts of climate change in the Santa Cruz Mountains, some of which we're already seeing. I know Semper Virens and many of our sister organizations like the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County or Peninsula Open Space Trust, we spend a lot of time trying to build resilience in the landscapes we own and manage, whether it's removing invasive species or trying to reintroduce natural processes like fire. But I wonder if you have other thoughts or suggestions for how best to help native plants survive future in the face of climate change.
Well, I think cultural burns and prescribed burns are a tool that's really been missing, and now people are more open to using those tools. Can be difficult to implement, but I think in many cases that's going to be a major solution for resiliency. And then protecting habitat, because if you only occur in a small area and it gets smaller and smaller every year, you have nowhere to go. You can't shift or move if there's a local disturbance. So I think supporting land trusts and parks and other organizations that protect habitat is really important.
And I did not pay you to say that, but we couldn't agree more at Semper Virens. Okay, well, going back to species you're hoping to see, and I loved the ones that you flagged and said you were going to be looking for, but I'm curious if there's some really elusive, plant that you have never seen that you think this may be the year because of the fires, whether you see it in the Santa Cruz Mountains or elsewhere. What's like your secret gem that you're on the hunt for?
Well, I think the Santa Cruz Mountains pussy paw, which I mentioned had only been seen once in 50 years. I've tried looking for that one all over the place, in the sandhills and some of the other non-burned areas. And I've not seen that. So even though it's not as showy or charismatic, that's one I'm really excited to see. But on the showy and charismatic side, that the penstemon, oh my gosh, I'm just so excited to see that in some new places. And when the fires were going on and I was checking the news all day, every day, and just feeling so hopeless and lost, sometimes I would think about the possibility of visiting some of these landscapes and seeing carpets of purple. And so that's really my dream is to see the penstemon potentially in really large numbers. So I'm really excited about that one.
Yeah, I hope we all get to. Those were stunning.
Oh, they're gorgeous.
One last question from me, and then we're going to open it up to the audience and their questions. And that is, the images of these plants are beautiful, especially the flowers, but all of them, they're just cool. And yet I think it might be easy for people to just think, so they bloom one year, then we don't see them again for another decade. To me, you touched on this, so I'm really just asking you to expand on it in your remarks. These plants are part of an ecosystem and they play an essential role, even if they only appear periodically. When they do come, it's because that's the time in the natural history of that landscape that they're supposed to be there. And you alluded and had a picture of an insect that I presumably accompanies a native plant that is a fire follower. But I just wondered if you could speak some more about the importance of these species, that if they're lost, it's not just that it's a beautiful flower that doesn't appear again. They really are part of the web of life. And I just wondered if you could expand on that a little bit for this audience to see that it's not just beauty that we're thinking about, but a bedrock of the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I love about rare plants is that it's such an important part of your local history wherever you are. I live in Santa Cruz. I have the endangered Santa Cruz tar plant half a mile from my house. So wherever you live in California, you probably have really special rare plants close by. And I think that in and of itself is amazing and is worth protecting alone, just based on how special that is as the story of your landscape and where you live. And then a lot of these fire follower species are going to be the first ones putting out flowers and vegetative growth. So that's really going to help support our pollinators. There have been lots of studies showing that ecosystems with native plants benefit agriculture by providing better habitat for pollinators. So there are human benefits to native plants as well, and providing forage cover for birds and herbivores. When there might not be a lot of other vegetation around, some of these plants are growing in the tens to hundreds of thousands, will really help the species that survived the fire keep doing their thing. And there are probably a lot of insect relationships that we don't know about with these rare species too. Maybe some of these fire following insects have evolved with these fire following plants. So there's a lot we still don't know, but I think besides the ecosystem services, it's just really amazing to think of all these special things that we have in the Santa Cruz Mountains and nowhere else. And rare plants can also be a tool for conservation. They can be an umbrella species of, if you protect one rare plant, you're not just protecting that population or that species, you're protecting everything else that lives in that habitat. And so that's how we've gotten some of our amazing preserves and parks and public lands, is through rare plant conservation. So, so additionally, by conserving the plants, then we'll conserve everything else too.
Well, I want to give a huge shout out to the California Native Plant Society. It's a really important organization. They do amazing work, and they are partners to land trusts like ours all over the state. And I also want to give a plug to everyone on this webinar who has a lawn to think about yanking out your grass and planting some native species, whether it's fire following species or just, California poppies that come up every year. Think about helping to support restoration and survival of native plants in our region. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Matt, who's been monitoring the chat, and he will share with us some of the questions from our audience.
Yes,
Thanks.
Great. I also wanted to mention, we have a PDF of some resources that I think we can drop in the chat. So that'll have links to the Fire Followers Project, and some free resources to learn more about natural history and ecology of some of these species.
Matt, I see Matt just put it in there.
Okay, great.
Amy, thanks so much. This was so much fun to see all the exciting treasures that might be dazzling us this spring and summer. I wanted to follow up on Sarah's comment that she just made. One of our attendees asked if there's any guidance CNPS can offer to homeowners whose properties burned and who may be inclined to, quote unquote, re-landscape their properties ASAP, but may be unaware of the treasures that may emerge if they hold off for a little while.
Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. With wildfires, in most cases, they leave behind a bare ground, but this amazing seed bank that we talked about earlier. So, so I would urge everyone to be patient and fight off the urge to replant. I know with fires, there's often a lot of people reach out wanting to know if they can do their own restoration efforts. And the best thing to do is to let your landscape recover on its own from the seed bank and what's already there. Of course, for erosion control, then those are cases when you might want to do replantings. In that PDF in the chat, there's a link to the CNPS Fire Recovery Guide, which was developed for Napa and Sonoma region, but has some good general advice statewide. So for homeowners and landowners, I would urge everyone to check that out, and that should be able to answer a lot of your questions. And if you own private property and would like to invite a volunteer group or a professional survey, then please let me know. Or I hope you also join the Citizen Science Project and start making observations yourselves from some of those burn areas.
Thank you for that. Here's one. Are new species ever discovered in your rare plant treasure hunts?
Sorry, I think my internet cut out for a second. Could you repeat that?
Sorry about that. Yes. Are any new species ever discovered in your rare plant treasure hunts?
We've not discovered, since I've been at CNPS in the past 3 years, we haven't discovered any species that are new to science under the program specifically, but botanists all over the state are describing new species. So I think there's always potential if we find something unusual that we can't identify or key out, it could be a new species. So it'll be interesting to see if we see things we haven't seen before in the burn area here.
Excellent. Do all fire followers need ashy soil?
No, for some, the cues can be different. Some it's just heat. Some it's the chemicals in smoke or the chemicals in ash. Some it's all of those. But often just the heat alone is a germination cue.
Excellent, thanks. Um, where are some sand hills in the Santa Cruz Mountains that might be public parks that can be visited?
Some great places to check out are Henry Cowell has got some beautiful sandhills habitat on the north side of the park that's open to the public. And Bonnie Doon Ecological Reserve has an area that's open to the public right now too. So what's amazing about the sandhills flora is that it's so rare, but then you'll be driving around a neighborhood or up a major road and there's super rare plants just next to the road. It's kind of awesome. So if you drive up Graham Hill Road or Mount Herman Road in Felton, Scotts Valley area, you're going to be seeing rare plants on both sides of the road there, which is pretty cool.
Excellent. And someone else in the chat suggested Quail Hollow Ranch County Park.
Yeah, Quail Hollow is also a great spot.
Excellent. And we will have a wildflower guide coming out with CNPS in a couple weeks, and we'll include some additional maps and sandhill habitat and park destinations. Here's a very specific question. I want to make sure I get this right. Was or is any of the Arcato Staphylos sylvicola outside of the burn areas? Did I get that correct?
I'm so sorry. I lost you again. If you could just repeat that.
Sorry about that. Was or is any of the Arcato Staphylos sylvicola outside of the burn areas?
Yeah, only maybe one or two populations that I know of burned. But those other sandhill spots we just mentioned, you'll be able to see Bonnie Doon Manzanita. Some of these populations are like tens of thousands. So there's definitely still lots of plants that you can go and see right now in areas open to the public.
Thank you. I figured you would know what I meant when I tried to pronounce that. Here's a question about trainings. Someone noted that there's an upcoming CZU Burn Zone in-person volunteer training, but it's full. Do you know if there will be additional trainings?
Yeah, so with the museum, we've just launched our volunteer efforts, and we're definitely going to add more trainings, not just for plants, for other species as well. But we hope folks will be patient with us as not many areas are open to the public and with COVID restrictions. So there will be more trainings added, but we appreciate everyone being patient as we don't have a great sense of, when we'll be able to get into some of these areas, but there definitely will be more trainings added too.
Great. And what kinds of precautions will folks expect for trainings and in any kind of in-person events these days? How are you handling COVID protocols?
So we just had our first in-person field trip last week. Small group RSVP only, had a cap on participants, and then everyone wears masks and does hand sanitizer. And we ask that people don't show up if they think they've been exposed to COVID or have COVID symptoms. So with working in sensitive habitats, it's often better to have a small group anyways. So when we do these in-person events, it'll mostly be pretty small groups.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's helpful for folks to know what they can expect. Finally, do you know if there are any efforts underway to curb the introduction of non-native and invasive species through retail outlets like garden shops, et cetera?
I'm so sorry. I need to get better internet service. ways to curb the spread of invasives through restoration and horticulture, something to that effect.
Yeah, let me try that again. But
Sorry.
do you know if there are any efforts to curb the introduction of non-native or invasive species by garden shops and other retail outlets?
So I don't personally work with invasive plants very much, so I'm probably not the best person to ask about that. But our local Santa Cruz CNPS chapter does efforts to remove invasives from different areas. Wherever you are, if you're from Santa Cruz or from outside of the area, there are CNPS chapters all over the state. And a lot are doing online meetings right now. So I'd recommend connecting with your local chapter is probably a good place to start. And then another good resource to learn more about invasives is CalIPSI, the California Invasive Plant Council. And they're going to have kind of the most up-to-date information on dealing with invasives.
I have one last question. Amy, if you can hear me. And I'm going to switch gears a little bit. There's been some really fantastic news recently around condors showing up in Big Sur and being reintroduced up north in Redwoods National Park. And it followed just coincidentally on some good news that had been reported recently about the incredible response of bald eagle populations following their listing decades ago on the endangered species list. And I just wondered if there were any analogs in the plant world that you could share with us about really imperiled species that have had, similar success stories or are on their way to recovery, since we often focus on the things that are at risk or that are being lost. So anyway, I just wondered if you could leave us on a high note around a plant recovery story about which we should be aware.
So I think what makes me really hopeful is that out of our 6,500 native species, only about 22 have ever gone extinct in California. So that's a pretty good rate considering how many species we have. There are a lot of species that only have 1 or 2 or 3 populations, and some of those are down to only a handful of individuals in the wild. An interesting thing to note about rare plants like our Monterey pine, some of them are very rare where they occur naturally, limited by different factors of soil and climate, but they do great in propagation. So botanic gardens are also a huge part in supporting biodiversity with some of our rarest native species. A great recovery story I can think of off the top of my head is Vinehill clarkia from Sonoma County. Beautiful, think of like a poppy, but it's hot pink, specialized for specific soils in Sonoma County, only found in 1 population in a preserve that was protected by CNPS and the Milo Baker chapter. The preserve got down to really just a few individuals, but through management over the past 10 years, there's now a very robust population at the preserve. Similarly with some of our manzanitas, there's a few species, one that's only known from 1 plant, another only has 2 plants, but luckily those plants have been preserved through seed banking and through propagation from cuttings. So even if it seems like these plants are in dire straits, a lot of these conservation efforts are helping support them with in situ conservation of the preserves and the habitat, and ex situ conservation of seed banks and living collections. So there's a lot of bad news, but I see a lot of hope and good news. And overall, I feel optimistic, that our native plants have been suffering over how we behave and treat the land. But I think that we as Californians are starting to move in a good direction. So despite all the doom and gloom, I think I'm still pretty optimistic.
Great. Me too. And I bet the people on this webinar they wouldn't otherwise be investing in conservation efforts. So thank you. Thank you for leaving us on a high note. Thank you for all you're doing for California's native plants and for your partnership with Semper Virens Fund. I want to thank all of our guests who joined today and remind them to be on the lookout for the wildfire fire follower guide that Semper Virens is working to put out with California Native Plant Society, and also to invite you to our next webinar. We're going in a totally different direction. Next month, we will have with us an environmental scientist, Portia Halbert, who is an expert in marbled murrelets, which is speaking of endangered species, an imperiled seabird that nests in old growth redwoods. So we'll be talking about the avian diversity of the Santa Cruz Mountains, and specifically marbled murrelets in our next webinar. So thank you, Amy. And thank you everybody for joining us, and we'll see you again at our next Under the Redwoods webinar series. Take care.
Thanks so much. Bye.